Hey, friends and followers here on Facebook. It is good to be with you again tonight. It's been a couple days, I guess, since I've seen you here. And tonight I have Chris, the Spinman Spintzyk, which I do want to learn the origin of Spinman tonight. I that wasn't an official question, but it's going to be now. How's that?
Honored. I will fill you in on all the gory details.
Awesome. So Chris and I have been friends for over 12 years, 13 years, something like that now. I think 2007 is when we first met, I believe. I recall. Yeah, I know exactly. Right. I think you reached out to me and you were looking for someone to fill a position. And I remember I passed you over to a friend of mine who was looking for a new role at that point in time, Joe Burns.
It was business objects related.
That's right.
You were the only person in Nashville when I did the search that came up with any kind of business objects expertise. And I had no idea what business objects was. And so I'm like, all right, I've got to talk to him, if nothing else, so that I learn what the heck it is. I've got to go find it.
I don't even honestly know if I could run a business objects report anymore. It's been so long since I've used the system. I don't even know if they exist anymore, but yeah, those were the days. But yeah, so we met in 2007, and then shortly after I passed you Joe Burns, I began to think about it myself. I was like, wait, why don't I just see what's out there? You know, we're going through some change. My wife was going back to school at that point in time for a culinary degree, and so I was like, well, I need to make a little bit more money, so let's see what's out there. And we went down that path, and Gaylord came back, company I was working for, and made a nice counter offer versus what I was getting elsewhere. So I stayed, but we've been friends the whole time, and hopefully been valuable for both of us, I think.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I've always told people that if I ever wanted to have a contrarian thought enter my head on a subject, it was always you were my go-to person to ask the question of whatever it might be, because you'd have me think about it in some other way that I normally wouldn't. I'm like, oh, wait a second, okay, that's interesting. You know, who would thunk it? And so yeah, you were my go-to guy for a counterintuitive kind of way around a project, or a creative way to look at something, for sure.
So yeah, I am counterintuitive, that's for sure. Nice. So Chris, I love that you're on here tonight. It's been way too long since we've met in person. Obviously COVID has something to do with that, and busy schedules I think also has a lot to do with that. And so I wanted to catch up with you here. I want to do it with all of our Facebook friends and followers here, because I have some pretty brilliant, amazing friends, and I've been bringing them on here since I think early March, and just trying to help people out, give inspiration, give tips and clues, whatever I can. So you being a brilliant networker and a genius recruiter, maybe I said those backwards from what I said earlier in the video, but you know, I think it's a perfect time to have someone like you on here to really kind of get a lay of the land, where things are going, what you think is happening, all those types of things. So, you know, we'll cover a lot of ground tonight, but, you know, just kind of want to start off with what's your take, like right now, just kind of overview, what's your take on what's happening out there in the job market, and where do you think things are going?
I mean, great question. And I wish I could say that it changes often given the environment that we're in, but it seems to be kind of very similar day after day. You know, where the challenges really are is that I think a lot of organizations they're still being very cautious. And so they're trying to kind of preserve themselves, you know, be mindful of kind of cash flow and business expense and a lot of things. And so with that comes, you know, the hiring conundrum. You know, do we continue to hire people because we want to push forward and continue to do business, or do we slow things down and hope that we can kind of maintain and, you know, kind of, you know, slow and steady, you know, hopefully wins the race for a lot of these companies. At least that's the way they're thinking. But, you know, at some point in time, you know, the argument has to be made of you can't just hold pat forever. the unfortunate thing about this pandemic is that the trickle down effect is real, and it touches every aspect. And you could kind of do the bigger circle diagram of, you start here and it gets wider and it gets wider. And so, the more cautious organizations are, the bigger negative effect I think it has on society as a whole, because it really forces things to stall. But if you ask people, everybody's quick to say, well, I don't want to write off 2020 in its entirety. We're halfway through the year. We still have 6 months to go. There's still a lot that we can do and everything else. But because of social media and because of everybody's afraid of backlash and everything else, the caution is still there. Nobody wants to be the company that jumps the gun and does something and then has to peel back, or gets backlash around wait a minute, you're hiring, you're forcing people to do work when instead you should be. I mean, there's this back and forth that's constantly there, that's made for a very, very kind of dynamic environment around the pros and cons of what's the right thing to do, for sure.
Dynamic environment. Now that's a PR word if I haven't heard one.
It's the politically correct way to say it. It's really
exactly
out there.
Exactly. Well, I was talking with some friends earlier today. We're looking at kind of the customer experience space and where it's headed, because there's some massive changes happening there, obviously. And one of the things that came out as we were talking was this whole idea of the ecosystem. If you think about customer ecosystem, but it's more than just customers. I was reading an op-ed piece earlier I guess maybe it was on Sunday, and they were talking about how you've got a massive amount of dual income families having to decide who's going to go to work and who's going to stay home with the kids when school starts, right? And it's not just, if schools don't start, but if they do go back and then they have to withdraw, come back out of school and go back online like we did, March through May, who's going to take the hit there? And so it's an interesting dynamic, because all this remote work / work from home situation. So what's your take on how the remote working is affecting the organizations as a whole? What's it doing to expectations for employees, productivity for companies? Anything else you want to throw in there?
No, I mean, in fact, I think if anything good that can come out of this whole pandemic C-19 fiasco that we're in is the fact that I think organizations now realize that productivity and business and things can get done without somebody having to be within the four walls of an office. It has allowed people, I know friends of mine, I know me in particular, we have a hybrid kind of approach that we've taken at Vaco. I mean, the office is open. We can go into the office and work if we want to. We can also work remotely. And so I do a little of both just for a change of scenery. But my productivity has increased, because one, my commute time, the 2 hours that I'd spend in the car going to and from the office, I can now spend, working or, preparing to work or something like that. And then two, just the ability to kind of focus without a lot of distraction, that sometimes comes in the office. I think there's something to be said for a little bit of camaraderie and being around other people. I mean, I'm a social animal, and so I need that. I mean, I go insane if I'm by myself too long. But at some point there is a tipping point there that you can hit to where you stop being productive and it becomes more of a social exercise at the office. And you look back at the end of the day and you're just like, wait a second, what did I accomplish? Here, nothing. Okay, now I've got to reset and do it again tomorrow and do twice as much to do it. I think that's a good thing for organizations to realize, hey, let our employees be productive wherever they're their most productive. If that's home, let them work from home. If it's a coffee shop, let them work from a coffee shop. If it's the office, let them work from the office. It's also opened up the recruiting, the talent pool for a lot of organizations. Some organizations now, I've got to hire somebody for this position who's within 30 miles of the office, because that's as far as anybody wants to commute before it becomes an issue. And so the talent pool is limited to, okay, who are my who's in that population that fits the bill that is also, close enough to the office. Now it's, I can really find the best person for the role, not only at a national level, but almost at a global level. So now the opportunity to truly find the best potential fit is there. I mean, there are no parameters anymore around, constraints behind, I've got to shrink the talent pool X amount because of any constraints. Now it's wide open, which I think is fantastic.
That is crazy. I mean, and that's just in a relatively short period of time, because we've proven the model works now under necessity, that, like you said, you can start recruiting on a national/global level. That is awesome. And probably a little bit overwhelming at the same time, because now it's like, where do you want to go? And, what are all the things that need to be in place so we can have someone from across the country or around the world working for us now?
Absolutely. Because that's the real issue that organizations face, is the onboarding and culture issue. They now have the capacity to recruit somebody anywhere. The challenge then becomes, how do we embed them into our culture and get them up and running and feeling comfortable, because they're not in the office. They didn't sit through the onboarding meeting where they got to meet everybody live and in person and go to lunch and do a lot of those things. Instead it's, hey, we shipped a laptop to your house. Here's the login, to everything. And we'll see you on Zoom or FaceTime or Teams or whatever we use, and we'll communicate via Slack and video call. And so that takes a lot away from the companies that are very culture centric. And so you've got to work really, really hard to make people feel involved and welcome and everything else. But I think most companies would argue and say they'd rather have that challenge than the challenge of trying to find somebody really, really good and being limited in who they can go after because of a geographic constraint, for sure.
That's interesting. Do you think, and these are just all off the top of my head questions right now, do you think that that's going to drive down labor prices then, because people are going to be able to shop around a little bit more, while at the same time driving up the talent pool that's available?
I don't think it's going to drive down the labor costs, because I think, at least in the skilled workforce, which is where I spend most of my time, people realize and companies realize where the value is. The folks doing the work realize where the value is. And because there are so many opportunities now, somebody doesn't have to accept a position that doesn't fit where they want to be, culturally, economically, geographically, whatever it is. And so I think that line will still be there around. If you want to hire really, really good people, you are going to have to pay what really, really good people cost in order to get that. But I don't think that that's wrong. I mean, that's the way it should be. I think more people are in the market, and I think more people now are able to look at different opportunities. And so the process may get longer or more involved, because just the sheer number of people that you can have a conversation with is growing exponentially, because there are so many folks who before wouldn't even listen. I mean, they'd be heads down, they'd be doing work saying, hey, life is great here. I've got nothing to worry about. Everything is good. I'm not even thinking about doing something different. But now you talk about, well, wait a second, you're telling me that there's an opportunity out there that's going to pay as much as I'm making now, but I can work from a beach, if I want to, I absolutely want to hear about that opportunity. Or, wait a second, the market is so fragile right now because nobody knows what is going to happen. I'd be crazy to not listen to potential opportunities because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
So on that, are you seeing a lot of people that are in jobs right now that seem relatively stable? Are you starting to see them looking around to see what opportunities are out there because they may be uncertain about what's going to happen with their own company?
Absolutely. A lot of the folks that would normally be highly passive candidates are becoming much less passive. They're not active yet.
Mm-hmm.
They're on the passivity, or whatever the word is, on the passivity level. It's starting to level up to where, they're starting to pay attention to opportunities that might be out there, where before it wasn't even something that would cross their mind. And a lot of it is the uncertainty.
Interesting. So what's your take as we head, I think the school systems are just now kind of getting their idea of what are we going to do for this fall? And some of them are still out in question. One of my daughters goes to school, we have not yet heard the plan. It's supposed to be coming out here soon, but where do you see that taking, at least in the field that you're aware of, like the IT field here? What's that going to do for employment? If kids do have to keep going to school at home, if you will, going online, like Metro Nashville, at least for a month, they're going to do online schooling. What's that do in your marketplace?
That basically mandates that any organization has to embrace and fully support a work remotely option. I mean, there's no way around it, because there's nobody that's going to sacrifice their child and their child's education because they have to go to the office and sit there and say, well, yeah, no, they said either my kid goes to school or he doesn't do anything. He sits at home because I've got to go to work. It's like, no, I'm going to tell my employer, hey, I'm sorry, I've got to resign. I've got to find something else. I've got to do that because I've got to make sure my child is equipped to learn and do a lot of things that they do. I mean, that's the real conundrum now that a lot of organizations are facing as we look into the becoming of the start of the school year is what does that really look like? And it now, I think, even organizations that were going to say, hey, at a certain point in time, we're going to want everybody to come back to the office once it's safe. I think now they're even looking at that and saying, well, I guess we're pushing that plan out further because there's no way we can mandate that when kids aren't in school, day in and day out. That's why I think that hybrid school plan where, kids would go Tuesday, Thursday, 1 week, and then Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the following week, and everything else and split the time, that would have been an absolute nightmare from a corporate perspective, trying to figure out from a scheduling, which parent or does the parent work from home, go to the office, go back, how does that work? That would have just, from a logistical standpoint, been just crazy and would have put more stress on the system, on people, on the kids themselves. It would have been catastrophic.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing. I don't know where the plan's at, but I heard something, I think it was Oregon or Washington State, somewhere up that direction, if I remember correctly. I was talking with a gentleman. He said the plan, it wasn't set in stone yet, but the plan they were thinking was like a week on, a week off. And then I heard something about New York possibly doing 2 weeks off, like 2 weeks from home and 1 week in the classroom, because they just don't have the space to do social distancing. So I just can't imagine how that would really work. And the other thing I think is going to happen too is you've got these parents who, if they do have to participate in the education process, which they're not accustomed to, I see two things happening. One is they're going to have to work unusual hours. There's not going to be the 8 to 6 or 9 to 5 or whatever. They're going to have to work earlier in the morning. You're going to have to work later at night. They're going to have more flexible time during the day to get, to get around those things. And the second piece that I'm concerned with is, I mean, I'm a pretty smart guy, but I'll tell you what, I have trouble sometimes helping my daughters with their homework. And that stresses me out when they're not getting things done or need my help, and I've got to do a client project at the same time. So I can imagine that's going to cause some strain on both the employers as well as the employees as they're trying to navigate those situations. So that's going to be interesting too, I think.
Well, and even from a technology perspective, the bandwidth
yeah.
issue, when you think about and saying, okay, I've got one parent or two parents working from home, that are constantly communicating via video or some sort of bandwidth-driven communication tool. Now you've got at least one child, sometimes multiple children in a household that also have to be on video 6 hours a day, and you expect that to go without any kind of a glitch. That's asking a lot when you're starting to look at what people, the bandwidth going into their house, people living in condos or apartment buildings where the bandwidth is split between all of the units and everything else because that's how it's laid out. I mean, that's a network engineering nightmare. And there's no quick fix for that, because you can't automatically just say, well, Comcast, just beef it all up because it has to be for education or whatever. It's not that simple.
Turn the power up and smoke coming out of the pipes.
Yeah, you don't just flip a dial and start beefing it up. And so there's real issues around that, especially when talking about parents who have, they need their machines to be operating quickly because they're processing transactions, or they're doing something in real time where it's time sensitive from a financial perspective, or from healthcare, from a treatment perspective, back and forth and stuff, where there can't be oh crap, I just went offline, in some instances, because it's like, well, wait a second, we're waiting for pre-authorization for a surgery, and this person, it's a life or death thing. You can't just go offline and say, darn it, my internet's not working. What am I supposed to do?
Yeah. I think the March through May timeframe, at least for us here, really tested. I actually had to upgrade computers because my computer could not handle the bandwidth issue, my older Mac. And on top of it, all the upgrades that were being made to the software, Zoom and others, it got so heavy on my machine, it just couldn't even process anymore. And so I had to upgrade. So I think that's a challenge that we're going to see too, that companies are just going to have to be looking at all those issues, but man, it's not an easy problem. It's an ecosystem. And that's, talking, when I was talking about that earlier, it's an ecosystem where it's not like we can just, replace one little thing and that's going to solve the problem. It's you've got parents, you've got kids in school, you've got, if the teachers get sick and they've got to close the schools down, if they do go back to school, what do? You're back to this situation. You've got all these different levels of employees. Some have to be physically present. Others can be remote, but who and when and where, it's a crazy situation right now. So I appreciate that kind of insight from your perspective. Let's turn a little bit for a second to the future of IT recruiting. Where do you see, kind of stepping away from the whole COVID situation, we are in this massive, massive acceleration right now in IT. And I look back to 2007 when we actually met right around the time the first iPhone was released. Let's put that in perspective, right? June of 2007. And I look at now, I'm using my phone here, so I can't take it off, but I've got a smartphone that I can use and run my business effectively on almost anything. I've written books on my cell phone. It's like you can do everything with it now. The acceleration that we're moving into in the next 10 years is going to be off the charts in comparison with the last 10, 12 years. Where is that going? What's that impact on you as an IT recruiter and, on the firm for Vaco itself?
I think there's two things. And both I think are positive. I think one, our business will continue to grow and flourish simply because of what we do. I think at the end of the day, companies have to hire strategically, and they have to hire people with particular skill sets. And a lot of times those people are not easy to find or easy to entice. And organizations, internal HR, internal recruiting organizations don't have the time to really develop the ongoing relationships necessary to, when the time is right, have those conversations with those potential candidates and facilitate a move one way or the other. Because a lot of times people just assume, well, wait, I'm looking for somebody, I post something out there and people apply and hopefully we fill it. But what a lot of people don't realize is the math behind that method is so skewed. At any given time, there are only 10% of the marketplace that will even look at and or apply to a posted position. So 90% of the market, you're not even going to reach or have a conversation with at any given time, just because that's the nature of it. Then it becomes an even smaller grouping, because now you're talking about the right 10% at the right time seeing your posting and applying. And then you've got to count on your system and your process to make that efficient and fluid so that you don't lose people in the process. So at the end of the day, you're probably looking at you've got a 1%, your candidate pool is 1% of the 10% that is actively looking at any given time. And if you pool or polled a hiring executive and said, hey, is the ideal candidate for you the 1% of the 10% that's actively looking? They're going to tell you, well, no, the ideal candidate is the best candidate for this role. Okay, well, you're technically not getting that if you just post and pray. And so, you have to have an active recruiting mechanism behind it. I mean, and that's what we do every day is relationship build, have those conversations, facilitate those discussions and stuff like that. And so our short list of people that we present to a client, to a candidate, are the short list of people that encompass the entire talent pool, not just the 1% of the 10%.
It's interesting because the job of a recruiter is so much different. The external recruiter, right, is so much different than the job of that internal recruiter, because there's really no way in a reasonable sized organization that an internal recruiter could go out there and be developing a network of possible candidates for all the different types of positions a company needs, right? So you've got to have that specialty of, IT or XYZ, whatever the positions are. I mean, I can imagine even in IT, that's such a broad world today for you that takes a lot of keeping up with, and, got to keep your finger on the pulse.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that's why when we talk to clients, because a lot of times, internal HR departments and recruiters see a guy like me as a threat. And it's like, well, wait a second, he's after my job. If I use him, I'm going to be out of a job. And the reality is, I don't want to try and fill every role that an organization has. I don't have the bandwidth for it. That's not what I do. What we do as recruiters is work on the strategic hires, the mission critical hires, the vitally important ones that you don't have time, or you can't take a chance on saying, let's hope we can fill this the old fashioned way. No, let us work on those and let us earn our fees for those kind of hires. Those are the fees and the kind of hires that you should be willing to pay for, because these are critical. The volume and everything else that's over there, there's plenty of that to keep an entire internal recruiting group and HR group busy, and have them kind of do what it is they do. Let me work on that one thing that you have to have and you have to fill quickly, where time and quality are of the essence. That's where we specialize. That's where our bread and butter is.
You've got some fans here watching. I think Blaine Wimberly says Spinman is the greatest, Spinman for president. So,
AI and machine learning and a lot of those other things where they say, oh, technology is invading, recruiting and doing all this, and it's going to replace the recruiter. No, it's actually going to make our jobs as individuals better, because we leverage that technology on the front end, not to do what we do, but to help us narrow the candidate pool so that we're having the right conversations with the right people at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a glitch here on my end, so I'm not sure if you heard me. But Blaine Wimberly, he reached out and said Spinman's the greatest, Spinman for president here. So
absolutely. I'm still waiting for Blaine Wimberly to take me fishing.
Well, Blaine, you heard it here. He's probably gone by now. I probably jumped off, said, hey, I said my piece, I'm gone.
Yeah, but Blaine and I have known each other probably as long as you and I have known each other.
That's very cool. That is a thing, Chris. I've always been impressed with your networking skills, like how you network, and the grace with which you network. It's always been amazing to me, and I've actually used you as a model for myself as I go out there and start to network with people, because actually around the time that we met, I did not network at all. I'm an introvert. I love sitting here. I mean, this is about as much socialization as I want on a daily basis, one-on-one, one-on-two, coffee shop's great. But, if I can do it behind my computer, I'm also real happy with that. And those networking events just drove me insane, And so when I saw how you network and how you build relationship and you touch back in on those relationships on a regular basis, it was like, oh, there's a different way to do this than these networking events. So, let's chat about that a little bit too, because I think that's something in where we're at today. How can people best network? What should they do? Maybe what are some best practices for people that are starting to say, hey, either I need a job because I'm out of a job, or I want to start looking because I want to know what's out there. How should they reach out?
Absolutely. I mean, great questions. And, it's it's as true now as I think it's ever been, that a lot of times what people are going to see is the next opportunity that they get is going to come from somebody that they know, or a connection that they made from somebody that they know. I think a lot of times people, when they're applying online and they're doing all that, I mean, that's a whole nother Facebook Live that we can do about, you know, and get me up on my soapbox about how I just wish people wouldn't do that, because it's so demoralizing, and it just nothing ever really good comes from it. And by that time you've moved on, and it really doesn't have a positive impact anymore. But, you know, the networking piece, I always look at, and there's a good friend of mine named Hal Hassel, who I think a lot of people in Nashville know Hal. He's been around for a long time. He's a brilliant guy. He's a fun guy. And he and I used to sit down and we used to joke around, because he used to tell me that what he got to do every day, and that he was cultivate friendships. That's what he did every day, and that the end result of the work that he did and the roles that he was in and the things that he were doing all came from that friendship cultivation. And I've never forgotten that. And I've always looked at, you know, any conversation that I've had, I can learn something from anybody. I want to learn something from somebody. I want to understand somebody else's experience and their viewpoints on things and everything else. And so when I'm talking with folks, when I'm networking with folks, when I'm, you know, it's never me trying to sit there and say, okay, you know, when am I going to pitch them on this role? Or, you know, when are we going to talk about this? Or when am I going to convince them that they want to look at something different? Or when are they going to use me to fill something? It's more just a regular conversation about, you know, real life and everything else, to where they see, hey, wait a second, he's genuinely interested in me and what I'm doing and what I'm up to and everything else. And oh, by the way, he's got a unique perspective on the problems that I'm trying to solve. And oh, wait a second, he does something that my company could use. Heck yeah, I want to use somebody like that, because it's easy. It doesn't feel like a transaction. It feels like I'm doing business with a buddy of mine. And that's the way I've always looked at everything that I've done is I enjoy making friends, and I enjoy building relationships, and I enjoy having those conversations, and I enjoy learning. You know, I just happen to do it in a role where I can earn a living doing it, you know, but if I had my way, you know, and hopefully my bosses aren't listening, because, you know, they may look at this and say, okay, have your way tomorrow, you know.
Well, I will say someone on the social media side from Vaco did share my post, so it's out there now.
Okay, so I'll say this with a caveat and say, you know, if I could have my way and help people connect the dots and just visit and drink coffee and do all that, if I won the lottery tomorrow, I'd probably do it and wouldn't have to worry about, you know, charging anybody for it. You know, so there's my caveat. You know, I still intend to do work, you know, because I haven't played the lottery in a while, so I'm good.
Well, you better not get a scratcher like for $25 or something, otherwise you're in trouble, man.
That's exactly right. So yeah, no, I'm staying away. But to answer your question around how people can do all that and everything else, I think the easiest way for people to network is to simply ask questions. You know, ask a question of somebody, you know, because they said something interesting, they recommended something that you saw, you know, they're at a conference, or they're in a meetup or whatever like that, to where the subject matter is something that you're both interested in. Ask a question and start a conversation, you know, because that's where the real dynamic happens. Nobody is going to, you know, hire you because I walk up to Tony and say, hey, Tony, I'm looking for a job and I want to go to work for your organization. Tony's going to look at you and say, wait a second, I don't even know you. You know, how am I going to recommend you? How am I going to, you know, even understand whether you'd be a fit or not in my organization culturally? We've got to get to know each other. Well, the easiest way to get to know each other is to have a conversation. The easiest way to have a conversation is to ask somebody a question and listen to the answer and start the back and forth dialogue that's there. I mean, a lot of people are afraid of networking events because they think that they've got to, that some sort of something tangible has to happen there for them to feel like it was worthwhile. The fact that you had a conversation with somebody new and you can follow up with them later to have another conversation, that's something tangible.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that's worthwhile. That's what I tell people when they attend a lot of the meetups. As soon as you ask a question, you now have the opportunity to follow up with the person doing the speaking. You get to talk to the 5 people around you who have heard your question and might have an answer. You can ask them the same question. And now you can follow up with anybody that was at the meeting and say, hey, remember me? I was the person who asked that question. I didn't have a chance to talk to you. What are your thoughts? And so now you've opened it up and you can talk to anybody.
It's a really cool idea because it puts you in a position where you're vulnerable because you're willing to say, hey, I don't know something, or I'd like to get your opinion. Maybe I don't have everything I need here. And so it actually conveys a level of confidence because you are being vulnerable, which is something that's very attractive to most hiring people, most managers and that. And I also find it interesting because it's such a good way to open the door without being too hard on what that goal is you're trying to accomplish. As you said, it's like you go to these networking events, and that's what I hated about them is no one ever taught me how to network, number one, right? I was like, so if I hand out a business card, what does that mean? Why? And because I was like, well, people give me their business cards, but I don't follow up because it didn't mean anything to me. Like, here, I'm Tony, here's my card. Okay. So, it's got to be something deeper there. And that's where I think having that conversation is such a powerful piece. How would they go about and do that in today's environment? I mean, we're not meeting at the coffee shops and things like that right now. So what's the alternative?
I mean, I think a lot of people really underestimate the power of LinkedIn and some of the other social media platforms out there, because you can do the same thing on Facebook, that you could on LinkedIn. And I spend quite a bit of time on LinkedIn. That is my quote unquote de facto database, by the time it's all said and done, but it's interesting how many conversations you can start based right there on LinkedIn, just looking at your feed and looking at what somebody posts and what somebody says about that and everything else, and how you can inject yourself into those conversations and provide, a snippet or, hey, these are my thoughts or something like that. And then once those conversations go deeper, it's very easy to set up, hey, can we do a virtual coffee? Can we do a virtual happy hour and socialize for a bit? I'd like to talk more about what we were talking about online, and do that. That's the beauty of kind of the video technology platforms that we have, where there are so many free and easy ones that are so seamless to use that it becomes very simple to kind of schedule something as simple like that, to where, no, I'm not going to meet you at the Starbucks up the street, but we can both grab a coffee from our Keurig and sit there in the comfort of our own home and have the same kind of conversation and do all that, and agree to meet up live later when COVID is past and it's safe to do so. And so I encourage people to take advantage of, those kind of platforms and not be afraid to think that this isn't an acceptable way to have a conversation, that the video platforms are not just for, it's where people go to have business meetings when they're working all day. They don't do it from a social aspect. No, they absolutely do. That's why they were created. That's why FaceTime, is it FaceTime? That's the Apple one, FaceTime?
FaceTime, yeah.
Time was invented, was to be able to do something live in video. So people are used to doing it, all the time. This is just a different way, a different platform. But video is a powerful medium. And most people, I think, are more open to having those kind of conversations as a get to know you type conversation, because it doesn't mean, wait a second, I've got to get in the car and I've got to drive to the coffee shop and we've got to come and have coffee. And what if we really don't, hit it off, or it's too loud and we can't really understand what anybody's saying. And so this was a wasted trip and then I'm pressed for time. When you're doing it from the comfort of your own home, it becomes a lot easier to make it work from a scheduling perspective. And it's a lot more disarming, and you're able to be a lot more of yourself because you don't you don't feel the social pressure of, wait, I'm out in public and, you know, I've got to do this or I've got to do that and everything else. And so it's made connecting a lot easier.
That's interesting, because I've been telling my clients that, and everyone, even that's why I do these Facebook Lives. I mean, like, there's no business model behind this. Honestly, it's just like, people need to hear stuff. People need to be connected. We're isolated. So get out there and use the video, use Facebook Live. I think I saw just recently, there was a report done that like Facebook Live is 1% of all the posting that's done out there, something like that. And so a lot, you know, there's maybe 15% or something like that is recorded videos and that kind of thing. But the authenticity of being one-on-one with someone and sharing that, or just, you know, being out there yourself and sharing yourself. And I think it's a powerful thing. And then, you know, doing the same thing with Zoom, reaching out to people, just having that personal connection. It's the best we're going to get for a little while, at least. And I think it's been awesome to watch people who do step into this and use this tool and this platform, or any of the video platforms, because they just start to realize the potential and the possibility of what they could do and who they can reach out to. It seems like people are more willing. I've had people open the door and be willing to have conversations with me that have never had, you know, been willing to open the door and have conversations before. And so I think you're right on target there. It's like, now's a great time to be networking, you know, and follow those things, ask some questions, start, you know, offering some responses or some ideas, and follow up with them and say, hey, can I, you know, have a quick video chat with you at some point here? You know, I love those ideas. So, very cool. So how would you suggest, if you've got someone who's looking out there, and we talked about earlier as an example, you've got some people who are saying, okay, I'm still in a good position, but I'm gonna start looking now. And you've got others who are out there that have lost their job and are, you know, they're looking for something new. What should they be doing right now? Like, is there like 3 steps or 5 steps? What should they be doing at this moment, if they're even considering the possibility of looking?
Okay. And a great question. And, there are a couple things that I encourage people to do. It's kind of a process. And this is something that I encourage people to do even when I'm interacting with them, because it's a way for me to help them. You know, once we've kind of talked a little bit and figured out, you know, hey, this is what I'm really looking for. This is who I want to be when I grow up. This is kind of what I'm, you know, when we start to kind of form that idea behind things. And I always encourage people to say, you know, think about that too, as you're thinking about what might be next. Think about what it is that you really and truly want to do, because you don't want to use this time to step into a role that, again, is going to be temporary, that doesn't make you happy, and have to do this again 6 months, a year from now, because you jumped at something. Now, obviously, people will say, well, I need a job, I have to do something. Yes, obviously you do. You have to take care of yourself, your family. I'm not saying don't do that to make ends meet and everything else. That's, you know, I would be doing the exact same thing. But if you're passively looking or contemplating maybe doing something different, once you kind of figure out and say, hey, if I'm gonna move on and do something else, this is what it is that I really want to do. This is when I tell people and say, okay, this is how you leverage the job boards and the job postings that are out there. You start doing the searches for the titles of the roles that you want, and you identify the companies that are hiring those kinds of individuals. Or you do a search on LinkedIn for those job titles and see who comes up, you know, because then you look at where they work and you say, well, wait a second. Okay, obviously these folks are senior software engineers and they work at XYZ company. XYZ company obviously hires senior software engineers, which is what I want to be. Put them on a list. And you start to make a list of the companies that either, one, are hiring or have hired the people in roles that you want to do, or you start looking at the companies from an interest perspective and say, is this company doing something interesting, or is their mission something that I can get behind where I would be really excited to go to work at this organization every day? And they go on your list. And I tell people, make a list of anywhere from 10 to 20 companies that you would be jazzed up about going to work for every day, that hire people in the role that you would like to hold. And I say this for junior level people too, you know, folks that are, you know, early in their career. If they hire senior software engineers, they obviously hire engineers. You're not a senior yet, but there's an opportunity that's where you want to go. So if the company's doing something that is interesting to you, put them on your list. Don't apply to the jobs and spend the hour that it takes to fill out all the platforms and attach your resume and write a 6-page dissertation about, the history of the black hole and what it is, what all these companies are asking for to try and get the process, because that just gets annoying. So once you've got your list, then you go to LinkedIn and you go to Facebook and you go to Google and you start doing some searches to see who are the individuals that, one, would be peers of yours, you would report to or work for, or have common connections inside the organization with somebody you know well enough so that you can kind of leverage that and say, hey, could I get an introduction? Because now becomes the networking part about it. Now you get to leverage the asking the questions part and everything that we talked about a few minutes ago, because now you identify individuals inside the organization and you say, okay, I've got to find a way to have a conversation with this person, not to pitch myself and say, hey, I want to come to work for you, but to find out more about what it is, what a day in the life looks like for them. Because when they fill you in on that, you say, well, hey, is that something that I really want to be doing? Yes or no?
Yeah. Is the company really what I think it is from the outside? Yeah.
Right. What is it? What made them choose the organization? Are they happy and excited there to come to work every day? Because that's what you want to be too. What kind of problems are they looking to solve, and what does the future look like for the organization? Are they excited about that? What advice would they give to somebody like you that is trying to better their career that somebody gave to them? Books to read, blogs to look at, courses to take, all of those things. It's very easy to have that kind of conversation when you reach out to somebody, show some vulnerability and say, hey, I'm thinking, I'm doing some research. I'm thinking about maybe doing something different. Your background or your experience or whatever, looks to be something that I'd aspire towards. Would you be willing to have a short conversation with me? Most people are going to say, absolutely, sure. One, it's human nature. People like to talk about themselves. So you're asking, hey, tell me about you. Okay, sure. I'm happy to do that. And the other thing is, people admire and can respect that vulnerability and that, hey, I'm trying to make myself better, and I think you might be able to help me, versus the converse of, hey, I think I'm awesome, and you should be tomorrow because I said so, because I think I'm awesome. People look at that and are like, wait, time out, no, back off, buddy. But, when you approach it from that other aspect of, hey, I'm just trying to get some information. Hey, I'm just trying to find something out. Hey, I'd like somebody to invest a little bit in me, because I'm struggling with something, or I'm trying to make myself better. Folks aren't going to turn you down from that. And those are fun conversations to have, because pretty soon you find out a lot of interesting things about a lot of interesting people. You become friends, a lot can happen from that kind of reach out and that kind of initial conversation, for sure.
Yeah, those are really good pieces of advice, because I can see how that would be really beneficial for people. And what's interesting is it's kind of the same process, if as a consultant, if I'm reaching out to a company to find out what they're doing and what's going on, that's kind of the same thing I do already. So, Chris, you are starting to turn into this invisible man here.
Hang on. Better.
There we go. I thought we were in the witness protection program for a few minutes there. I'm beginning to wonder.
Hey, well, people have wondered, and asked about that. So I always say I cannot confirm nor deny that I am a member of that program.
Well, so I'm gonna turn things a little bit. We're gonna go toward the other side now. We're gonna you could be, because you're from Chicago, and we know there's a lot of shady characters that come from Chicago. So
that is true. That is absolutely true.
So, totally off the wall, what's something you miss about Chicago living here in Nashville?
The food, without a doubt. I mean, Well, now my friends and family that are watching this are saying, "What are you talking about?" You know, you first thing you mentioned is the food. I still have a lot of good friends and family that are there. That goes without saying, because I mean, I will always consider Chicago home. I mean, I've been
Yeah.
here in Nashville since 1996, and you know, I will still always claim, you know, Chicago is home. But
Hmm.
I really miss the opportunity to have at my, I don't want to say disposal, but so readily available, any kind of ethnic food that my heart desires.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, here in Nashville, you can get some of that, but you've really got to look long and hard to find it.
Hmm.
And some of it you just can't get. I mean, in Chicago, you just throw something out there and it's like, okay, yeah, you know, let's go get some of that, you know, and half the time you can get it in your own neighborhood. You know, I mean, I
Right.
grew up in the city itself. And so I had the opportunity to make friends with and experience a lot of different, you know, cultures and ethnic groups and everything else that was the, you know, were spent kind of immersed in that. And so I will never take that for granted and miss it terribly for sure.
Absolutely. Well,
And
Chicago's a great.
my waistline doesn't miss it, you know, but the
Chicago's a great city. It's funny because I grew up in Wisconsin, so you know we have you know certain um, predispositions about people from Illinois, but you pass the muster. You're good. You're good.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that for sure.
No, it's very cool. You've always been, I think, a great resource for people in Nashville, and I mean, I even have friends that you know they reach out to me from Virginia, from California, wherever they are, and they're like, hey, you know, I'm looking for an opportunity. Who do you know? And if there's any way that I think that you might be able to help them or give them a tip or whatever else, it's like I'm going to send them over to you because I know that they're going to be taken care of. You know, so
Like I had one of those conversations today with one of your buddies.
cool, very cool. Was it
Yeah.
Dave? Was it Dave?
Yeah.
Yeah,
He and
he was
he and
on
I
here earlier.
connected.
Yep.
We connected this morning for sure. So yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, it's and that's the thing is like you were talking about this early on the global network now. I think it's so important for people to realize that you know if you're looking for a job, don't just sit in your backyard because you might be able to get something across the country. You might be able to get something in another country. And my girls were talking the other day, they're like thinking about, you know, well, where could we go to? Where could we move to if we wanted to after graduation? And I'm like, or even like to go to college abroad, right? If and when things open up again. But you know, it's like actually I've got friends who have moved to Costa Rica and places like that, and they love it there. The cost of living is low. It's a safe country. And they do some work from here. I've got a friend that lives in Argentina from New York City, and he works and lives in Argentina right now just because he enjoys it. Works with people out of the States. So it's fascinating what we can do today if we really want to.
There's a technology executive, you know, here who's here from Nashville who has spent the last 9 months in Thailand.
Wow.
Continue to do work and everything else. And I follow his posts, you know, on social media because one of the things he was talking about was how pandemic free Thailand is.
Hmm.
So he's compared and contrasted what they've done in Thailand versus what the United States have done. But part of the reason why he stayed over there was because he was still able to do all the work that he wanted to do and accomplish the things that he needed to accomplish, but he didn't have to worry about getting on a plane and coming back and putting himself at risk. He said, I can stay, you know, halfway around the world and still continue to do the things that I need to do without having to worry about it at all.
Yeah, I think things are going to change a lot in the next few years. So looking forward with IT, the IT field, do you see a risk with the pace that things are moving that we're going to have a lack of the skills we need? Do you think that's going to hold things back?
I think to a certain extent, yes. I think, I mean, we're running into that issue now. And this was pre-COVID. I mean, where just from a software engineering perspective, there is more work out there already than there are engineers to do it. And that pace just continues. And then you look at the technologies and the platforms as they change. And so now you're talking about folks having to do a skill set change, learn new skills, new languages, new platforms. And so that automatically increases the learning curve and reduces the opportunities for folks to kind of do things at a senior level. Now, where I would make the argument and say this is a great time for organizations to start to invest in mid-level to junior level folks and give them the opportunities to start cutting their teeth on real world business problems, because it's only going to help you in the long run, because you're getting people familiar with your platform, with your code base, with your technology stack and everything else. And in order for that to be effective, it's a redistribution of the workload. It's not, oh, we've got to completely stop what it is we're doing and we've got to train people, we've got to do all this. Yes, there's some of that involved, but it's easy enough to do. There are companies that are doing it and doing it successfully. And I sometimes wonder why more organizations don't adopt that model and say we really have to invest and start to build people from the ground up, because really and truly, that's where we're going to catch up, especially with the pace that things are changing. I mean, if you look at some of the new technology now that a lot of companies are moving towards, it's only been around for the last 3 to 4 years. And so you look at somebody who's had 6 months to a year's experience at a university learning that, and somebody who's got 6 months to a year in corporate America working with it, they're on an even playing field. It's not because he's got more work experience, he or she is better. They've got the same experience with the technology that you need somebody to have experience with. So let's start looking and giving people the opportunity to start to do some of that stuff, to where the gaps start to shorten, because, it's only going to get worse. I mean, the speed of business, the speed of how things are happening, the ability for the cloud to allow more companies to do a lot more things only increases that gap. I mean, that's the whole digital transformation piece. That's what everybody is talking about now, is the speed of doing business and the ability to change on a dime as your customers shift, as your business shifts, as everything else. Technology is a great enabler for that, but you still have to have folks to do it.
So where would you go if you have
the other piece too that
go ahead.
No, you broke up there for 1 second.
Okay, I thought you were going to go ahead. So go ahead.
No, what I was going to say, the only other area where you're starting to see a big rift in talent and everything else is on the security side. Information security, cybersecurity, and everything else there's a huge need right now, and there aren't enough people to do the work. And so finding experienced people that have done a lot of these things at the levels to where it's required, I mean, that becomes very, very difficult now. And so, encouraging people to kind of go into that direction and start to learn and use that as a career path or whatever. There are so many opportunities there. It's not even funny.
So that kind of leads into where I was going to ask you next, was from a perspective of, you've got 2 kids, right? What are their ages now? They're going to college, or are they?
Delaney is this is her freshman year in college, and Nick is going to be a senior in high school this year. So
okay, so a couple of years ahead of my girls. So if you've got, let's say someone here is watching this, who've got kids that are in high school, if they show an interest in technology, gaming, whatever else, right? What would you recommend the parents expose them to, and potentially maybe even get them started on? I don't encourage kids to get started too early, right? They got to have their childhood and all that. But what might be some good things that you would point them toward, just to see if they have an aptitude for it?
There are a lot of kind of STEM related curriculums or sites and everything else that a lot of people can have access to now, where it makes technology fun, to where you can start to kind of look at that. And a lot of it, robotics and, some of the other kind of platforms where you look at it, even from a gaming perspective, where there's gaming engines where you can people can learn to build games and do a lot of that, the Raspberry Pi stuff. There's a lot of that stuff out there to where it still becomes, it's a fun challenge for kids to kind of play around with and say, hey, is this interesting to me, or do I have an aptitude for it? Another thing that I think is fantastic, a couple things. One, a lot of the modern development languages that everybody is using now are open source languages. So they're free to download, they're free to learn, they're free to use. And so there isn't a barrier to entry for somebody who says, hey, I want to learn how to program, I want to learn how to code, I want to do that. I mean, it becomes very, very accessible for somebody to do that. And then there are, books and in blogs and in tutorials and everything out there that make it very, very easy to jump into that. Another thing, Pluralsight. I mean, Pluralsight is a subscription-based video learning platform that, from a technology perspective, I don't think there's a technology out there that there isn't some sort of content that somebody can access and watch and learn from beginning to advanced. There are some really, really talented people. It's high quality stuff, and you pay a monthly subscription to get access to this, and you can watch it at your leisure, learn at your leisure, do a lot of those things. And so as people are starting to look around and say, oh, well, what about this? Infrastructure, the cloud, security, software engineering, robotics, machine learning, data science, big data, all of those things, it's all out there for somebody to at least kind of immerse themselves in and really get an understanding of, what that really means and what it really is. And I think too, a lot of, high schools now, I know a lot of the universities are making access to a lot of this stuff so much easier than it was before, that it's out there and easy for people, especially young people, to kind of find and really become a part of. I mean, I know that there's, even here in Nashville, there's a video gaming group. There's a bunch of these groups where it's all young people that are getting together to kind of, share common interests and talk about the things that they're interested in and stuff like that, which I think is fantastic. And I'm encouraged to see, more of that, especially as we get past, a lot of the C-19 stuff and kind of get back to, group gatherings and stuff like that, where you can see a lot of this happening in real time.
So do you think that we're going to see a place where maybe the younger generation, Gen Z, picks up this stuff more quickly than, or they pick it up fast enough that they may not have to go to college for 4 years? Like, could they get maybe 2 years and bypass it and still get a really good job with it? Or what are your thoughts here? Because I mean, I know a lot of parents are out there saying, gosh, college is ridiculously expensive. Can my kids learn this stuff at an earlier age? Can they get a step in? Maybe they go back to college at a later point in time, but is that a viable option today?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there are some really, really talented people doing some really, really cool stuff that didn't go to college, do not have a degree, and are making an incredibly good living, excited about what they do every day, and contributing meaningful ways to society as a whole with some of the things that they're building, especially from a technology perspective. It's incredible where all the opportunities are now, and the fact that a college degree isn't a necessity anymore to get a really, really good job, establish yourself on a career that has the opportunity to really progress and take you in a lot of interesting and exciting places. Now, I'm not sitting there saying that nobody should go to college anymore and, let's just forget the whole higher education system in general. No, that's not me at all. But I mean, but for the folks that are sitting there saying, hey, I don't know that college is for me, that I want to do something different, or I really wish that there was an opportunity for me to kind of do some different things, learn in different ways, better myself in a different atmosphere than a traditional classroom. Absolutely, that is there. And it's there in a lot of different ways and very, very accessible for sure.
That's cool. I mean, I've seen so many things come out. Some of these universities, MIT and others like that, they just have a lot of content online. You're not earning credits, but you can get the skills. And I was just wondering where that was going. Like if people are, I guess if you have a portfolio of work and you can show them that you know what you're doing, that's what they care about more than anything else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because that's really and truly what it boils down to. I mean, when you're talking about from a hiring perspective, a hiring manager has a set of problems that they are trying to work through. And the person that they're trying to hire is the person who can make their life easier by helping them to knock those set of problems out. The only way that you're going to demonstrate that you can do that is to show something comparable. Hey, you're working on this and you need somebody to do this. Here's where I've done something similar. Here's something that I've built. Here's a platform that I've worked on. Here's a problem that I've solved that is very similar. That's where the correlation is. It's not going to be, oh, let me see, wait a second, you graduated from XYZ University. Okay, you're qualified to solve this problem. It's no, you got to demonstrate to me that you can do it. The only way to demonstrate that you can do it is to do it. And with technology the way it is, the ability to build things and host things and develop a portfolio and do a lot of those things, it's so readily available and so easy to do. I mean, GitHub and everything, you can host, you can contribute, you can do all of those things, and people can see it. And people can look at it and say, wait a second, that's really, really good. Or use that as a discussion piece and say, talk to me about why you approached it this way or why you chose to do things in this direction. I mean, that's what a lot of the coding interviews are anyway. Here's a problem. How would you solve it? Well, if you've already done it and you can talk to it with code that you've built that you're familiar with and can explain, then you're solving, a lot of the interview questions right then and there by demonstrating, hey, I've got a leg up on it. I've already worked on some of this stuff.
That's a really cool idea, because I haven't used a resume. I've had a couple clients like say, okay, we need to see what you've done, whatever else, but I can't talk about a lot of my projects since I've been in consulting anyway. So there's not much value to them. It kind of ends at 2009. It's like, I've been consulting since then, but when we get talking, when I go into a company, they're sitting there saying, gosh, we have this problem. We need this solved. And I relate back to, okay, I had a problem similar with another client, and this is what we did, or, I think, we can take a look at this and do it maybe this way. So I get that idea from the consulting side. What I'm intrigued by is it sounds like, the traditional resume, if you're really going for these roles in IT, you got to have something, but it's like, get out there on GitHub and these other places like that and start doing things where people can see. And you can prove your value by solving problems. And that, because I was going to go one place with the question and you kind of went around, which is very cool. I like that. You kind of read my mind in advance. I was going to ask, as far as like writing a resume these days, when I have people come to me, they say, here's my resume. It's like, here's my skills and this and that. I'm like, as a business owner and as a person who's been in consulting, it's like, why would you not rather look at the problems you've actually solved and talk about the metrics, talk about what you did to improve things, and structure your resume as a series of projects underneath that title? Because everyone knows, if you got a standard title, everyone knows what that title does, for skills, what you do with it. And talk us a little bit through what you would love to see on a resume these days.
Absolutely. I mean, the resume should be a document that tells me what you did. Not the generic, this is what I was responsible for, this is what was assigned to me, this is what my day-to-day was. That's all great. We all know that, but what did you do in that context? Yes, you managed a group of people. Okay, did you make them better? Did they get promoted? Did you increase productivity? Did you do that? Yes, I wrote software that did X, Y, and Z. Did the software that you wrote make the product better? Was it incrementally better? Was it faster? Was it scalable? Was it, people want to see what it is that you did. The days of the generic, here's the 4 bullet points underneath there around, yes, I write code every day. Yes, I do that. It's like, yeah, we know that. We need to start talking about your accomplishments in the context of that role. And the rule of thumb has always been, any manager that's looking at somebody's resume wants to see one of 4 things. Did you make the company money? Did you save the company money? Did you save the company time? Or did you create a process or policy that made the organization better? Those are the four things, because if you look at most of the problems that most organizations are trying to solve, it's around those four things. How do we make more money? How do we save more money? How do we become more efficient and save time so that we can make more money or save more money? Or how do we make our organization better from a pure organizational development perspective?
That's great. And that might lead in, we actually got a question here on Facebook on the chat. So Patrick Tully says, what's the best way to negotiate salary? If it's an existing job, do I need to have an offer with an outside company to truly negotiate?
That's a great question.
Yeah. Especially right now, I think it's a really good question.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good question. And from a salary negotiation perspective, a couple things. One, you have to kind of have an idea in your mind as to where you want to end up, because it's got to be a win-win for everybody. So you can't just negotiate for the sake of negotiating, because you think, well, wait a second, I've been told that I could get better, or I could, so I'm going to roll the dice and try and do it. Don't do that. Have an opportunity in mind around, or have a number in mind as to where you would like to be. The other thing is you start to begin to look at your existing salary and the context of what we were just talking about and say, wait a second, these are the things that I've accomplished for the organization. And then you find a way to quantify those into a dollar amount. Wait a minute, I helped the company do X, Y, and Z, and it was this. Don't you think that's worth, X percentage in a salary increase? Because look what my team was able to contribute to the bottom line one way or the other. It's never really good to go outside to get another offer to try and get a counter inside an organization, and that's a whole nother conversation. Counter offers are horrible. You never want to accept a counter offer. You don't want to go down that road. It's setting you up for disaster for so many different reasons. So never use, hey, I'm interviewing for another job and I'm going to leave, because you're trying to get your company to counter. You would rather find the opportunity with the better salary outside the organization and leave than it is accept the counter because you're going to pay for it later. And that's a whole nother topic, the philosophy around the counter offer and everything else. That's something that us as recruiters have talked through and talked around for forever, because it's the bane to our existence to a certain extent, because now we've got a client who thinks, hey, a candidate is getting ready to move and we've got an offer. No, they decided to stay. It's like, well, really, what the heck for? If they were going to stay, why did we even go through all this?
The crazy thing about it is, like, most of the time, people are not leaving because of money. They're
right.
leaving because of their management or something else, and the money seduces them back. And what I've seen, and this is the rule of thumb, if anyone ever asks me that question, I usually say, okay, listen, if you're thinking about leaving and you're coming back for the money, in 30 days, you're going to be miserable. I've seen it happen again and again. Now, I will say the caveat to it is, when I was leaving, when around the time we met, I was looking to leave. It was because I actually did need a pretty significant increase, and my role had grown and the money had not. And so when I came, I said, I was upfront. I said, I'm going to do some interviews. I would love to stay with this company, but you guys don't have a role for me to where I want to go. And so I started doing the interviews. In the process, I actually wrote up an entirely new job description, would have been like a level above. And I told him, I said, when I came back, I said, I do have an offer on the table. I will take it. This is where I would like to be in 18 months, 12 to 18 months. I think I can do it. And it was interesting. They came back. There was a little begrudgingly, but they came back and they moved me significantly. But it was also because we had just opened up text mining, putting a text mining platform in there. I just taken over customer experience. So there's a lot of things that could justify the change. But to your point, never, ever, ever, stay for the money. There's usually it's remembered within the organization. Let's hit that one.
Absolutely. It absolutely is. And so from a negotiation standpoint, if you are due in your mind a raise because your level of responsibilities have increased and you've been asked to do a lot more. Somebody else in the organization has left and they've dumped that role on your lap in addition to, the role that you were doing. And so now you're effectively doing, the role of two people. It is very fair to sit down with your manager and discuss and talk about it and say, hey, something's got to give here. I'm willing to do the work, but if I'm doing the work of two people, shouldn't I get, compensated, for a person and a half or something, if I'm effectively doing two people's roles, treat me fairly. That's all I'm asking for. And most organizations, most managers, if they're worth their salt, would respect you coming to them and having that conversation and being able to work through that. And if they don't, then that's just another reason to say, wait a second, is this the kind of organization I want to stay with long term? Right. It might be time to think about doing something else where I'm going to be appreciated and valued and where my skills are going to, be better utilized because the company's going to allow me to do what it is that I want to do.
Yeah. One of the rules of thumb I use when I'm consulting and people are like, okay, let's price this out, have the long conversation first about what do you need to accomplish? Because think about it. I go on job interviews an awful lot. Every time I get a new project, it's a job interview. That's kind of the way I look at it. And so one of the things that I look at is we talk through what the problem is they're having, what it's costing them, what they think it'll be worth if we solve the problem, those types of things. And I try to look at it from a perspective, like if the margin's not big enough, what can I do? I try to look for a 10X. In other words, if I want to make, for every $1,000 I want to make on the job, I want to make sure that I can bring them measurable $10,000 in revenue. And the reason I do that is because if you figure they've got to put work in, whatever I come back and recommend or do for them, they're going to have to do some additional work. So, 20-30% of that $10,000 might be go into the project itself to get it off the ground. Then they can finally start making some money on it. But I find that just that 10X is a good way to look at it. So if you were looking for a raise of $5,000 or $10,000, show the company that you've gone above and beyond to help them earn an extra $50,000 or $100,000 or save them that type of money. And when you can do that measurably, most managers want it, but they're so unaccustomed to getting that. That's my experience.
Yep. That is exactly right. And they're not used to seeing that quantified.
Yeah, exactly.
A lot of people don't really understand where the dollar value is to some of the work that is being done. And even for us as recruiters, I am forever talking about, lost opportunity cost with our clients and educating them on how much more it's costing them for that seat to be empty than any fee that they're going to pay me to fill it. And a lot of the times they're caught by surprise because it's like, well, wait a second, there's a mathematical equation that shows that. And well, yeah, there is. And when you start doing the math, you realize pretty quickly this is a necessary role that has to get filled, and it's pretty darn expensive every day, week, month, quarter that role isn't filled, and productivity or production or whatever it is isn't out there. The numbers add up pretty drastically.
Right.
Our fees are like, well, wait, so that's a drop in. They'll absolutely go do that, and let's get this thing filled sooner rather than later.
And especially if it's a strategic role, as you were talking earlier, a lot of the types of roles you are recruiting for, those are the types of things where it's not like you want to put them over a barrel or whatever else, but at the same time it's like, listen, this is a critical role here. If you don't get this filled, things are going to start to break in your organization. You're not going to be able to succeed. And so I think it's also valuable today to be looking at those types of things because a lot of organizations are looking at what can we do with less of, can we trim back here? How do we get higher quality people into certain positions and that? So I think it's good to be aware of that and say, if you're moving me into a different role, you're going to change my responsibilities here. We got to have a conversation about the price of this too, because I have been in those positions where there was literally one time I was offered a promotion from one level to an entirely new level in the company. And it included stock options, everything else. That's the grade increase it was, right? It was pretty significant. And my salary was going up by 3%. Now I was due a raise anyway. If you want to look at that, it was the time for the raise. A 3% increase was like cost of living. I'm like, wait, so you're not giving me a raise over what I've done. You're not giving me a raise for the new position. no, I don't think we're going to do this.
Right. Well, yeah, because again, a lot of where it is, and that's where a lot of companies, incentive compensation is great because it allows you to bet on yourself and say, hey, I have the opportunity to do what I know I can do and will be rewarded for it. But it can't take the place of, I've got to pay the bills and support my family and do that, because if I can't do that, I'm going to be so stressed out coming to the office every day. I'm not going to perform at the level that I need to. And so I'm never going to hit these incentives anyway. Let's make sure that I can meet my financial responsibilities and then put the incentives out there and give me the carrot to really go after, and let me show you what I can really do. Amazon does great in that perspective. The way that their compensation is allows people to do exactly that. And that's why there are some folks that do really, really well inside Amazon, and they are top performers. And that's why Amazon hires those people.
Having trouble unmuting there. So with that, there's an interesting question that comes up then. Almost every job I'd ever interviewed for, I see my wife still, she's had this happen when she's interviewed for jobs. The inside recruiter is asking, how much did you make at your last job? And frankly, I feel that is not just unnecessary. I think that's an unethical question. That's my opinion. And for a number of reasons, because I do think it biases them to pay less than what they should pay for the role. I think it perpetuates the pay gap where it exists for men and women, which is, pretty significant in some cases. And I think it also doesn't look at the value the person's bringing to the table, regardless of what their last employer thought. So what's your take? How would someone handle that situation? And I know as a recruiter, you probably end up in that situation having to talk through that. So what's your take?
As a recruiter, it's interesting because that information is almost necessary for us to a certain extent. But the way I always approach it is, it's as we're looking for opportunities with clients, our clients give us kind of a salary range or where the target is, where we want something to be. And so when I'm talking to potential candidates, in order to make sure that we're in the right ballpark, and normally I want to make sure that they're not making so much more that this would be a step backwards, and so it would be a waste of time for somebody to talk about, because I'm not in the business of asking people to take pay cuts. I want them to do better, not worse than what they were. And so I always tell people, I'm like, just give me a ballpark of where you need to be in order for the role to make sense. It's not, where are you at now? It's not,
that's a very different question to ask.
Yeah. It's where do you need to be, and that's how I get, and that's how I tell people, I said, just ballpark me, and that way we get the conversation started on the front end, because then I can share and say, okay, well, this particular role, we're in the ballpark, what you're looking for and where they're kind of looking to be, we're pretty close. It's probably worth talking about and kind of getting you in the process. If it's way off, then it's like, well, hey, wait a second, you're looking to be at, 170 and they can't afford you, man. I mean, it just is what it is. They can't do it. Because then the conversation is, well, wait a minute, where are they looking to be? Because then somebody can kind of justify in their own mind on the front end. I want to make sure we're close on the front end so that it isn't an issue on the back end when it comes time to make an offer. Because when we submit a candidate, and our submittal process is, here's their background, here's why we think they're a great fit, here is what they are looking for in their next opportunity. And that's where the conversation starts. So I tell people all the time, I say, we can start with whatever number you want to, whatever you're comfortable with. It can be whatever it is. Whether the client decides to have the conversation with you or decides that they can afford you or whatever, that's entirely dependent on them. So here's where they want the range to be. You tell me what number we want to submit you at, and that's what we'll go with. Because, I mean, as a recruiter, we get our fee, while it's paid by the client, is a percentage of the person's base salary. So I want you to make as much as possible. because that's the economics of our business. That's just how it works. But I also want you to be able to make a living. I want you to be excited about the role. I want you to be comfortable that you're doing this, because I don't want 6 months in, 3 months in, whatever it is, saying, oh man, I'm really miserable here. They're not paying me enough for the work that I'm doing. Well, we should have figured that out on the front end, not while you're in here already, because all those questions, they had the opportunity to have been answered throughout the process. And so to answer your question, to kind of go back on it with regards to, at least from a recruiter's perspective, where you're at salary wise currently isn't so much of an issue. But on the internal recruiter, they're kind of looking at it the same thing. They're asking, hey, well, where are you at? Because we want to make sure, one, we can afford you, and two, that you fit in within the salary band so we can have these conversations. So I always tell people, to kind of couch that in a certain thing, and kind of don't answer the question, but answer the question, and kind of say, hey, I didn't realize we're at an offer stage. Here's kind of where I'd like to be, but I'm happy to entertain your best offer.
That's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. And then
just don't say anything else. And if they press, you kind of rephrase the same thing. Hey, wait, I didn't think we were there yet to talk about compensation.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm looking for, and I'd be happy to entertain your best offer.
That's a good way to put it, because I have seen that where they push back and no, we need a number, and it's like, there's a point at which I think it's not a good question to answer. It's not good for you as the employee. But that's a great way to take it, though. I like that.
And
Very
cool. And it's one of those things, and that's why whenever you're cognizant of it all, you've done your research, where you need to be to live comfortably.
Yeah.
That's kind of where you want to start, all of those conversations. I mean, you don't want to price yourself out of the role by saying, well, I can pay my bills making X, but I'm going to ask for Y and just see what happens. Well, a lot of times you're going to get booted from the process because you're going to say, yeah, sorry, it's not going to work.
Yeah, it's too high.
Oh, crap. Wait, no. I was just thinking, I really didn't want that. I wanted this, that never
wanted the job.
And so, just make sure you think through that and say, hey, what's it going to take to really make me happy and be comfortable with that number, so that you can kind of make that statement and not feel bad about it.
Awesome. Well, Chris, we've been going for almost 90 minutes now, which is awesome. I love that. Any other top of mind things or important things in your mind for people out here? We have a lot of people that are absolutely loving the content here. Several comments on here, lots of the emoticons and that. So anything else that you want to share that you think is important other than something related to the Bears? Nothing about the Bears.
No. I mean, in fact, while I am,
I should have worn my Packer shirt. That's what I should have done.
I haven't been a vocal fan for a long time. I still don't understand what the heck they're doing up there. So I kind of leave that one alone. But the only thing that I would really tell people is this: the time that we're in now, nobody is immune from it. Everybody has been affected. Everybody has to just kind of take a deep breath, relax, know that everybody is doing their best to try and make things better and do the right thing and everything else. And so the more human we can be with each other, and the more empathetic we can be with each other as we try and navigate all of this, the better it is for everybody. For those that are looking for new opportunities, companies continue to hire. Companies will continue to hire. It's not going to be at the level that anybody would expect. In fact, I mean, for me, this is normally our busiest time of the year as a recruiter. It's basically from, spring break until Thanksgiving. We're turning and burning. My business has been affected. We've seen slowdowns with our clients. We've seen a lot of things get put on hold or kind of, budgets readjusted and everything else. So, I mean, it's affecting everybody. But just kind of be patient, work, create a system, create a routine, do something every day that gets you excited about what the future looks like. do some research, figure out a new company, better yourself, read a book, do a lot of those things that can kind of give yourself some hope around, hey, I'm better today than I was yesterday. And know that there are opportunities, good, smart, hardworking, passionate people will always find an opportunity to do work and be good, smart, passionate, hardworking people. It may not be the exact role that you're looking for at this time, but it's going to set you up to get to that point. You just have to be willing to put forth the effort and put yourself out there, to kind of do it. Be a lot more proactive about what you're doing. I mean, that's why when we talk to folks, even today, when you're looking at positions with regards to your resume, be prepared to customize your resume to the role that you are interested in, down to the bullet point level. You have to be willing to illustrate why your background and experience directly fits what that client is looking for based on the job description. That's where the conversations are going to start. That's the only way you're going to be invited to come in and talk about opportunities, is if they see that direct correlation. So the days of, here's my resume and I just submit it to everything and somebody's just going to figure out, read between the lines that I'm a fit and I'm a good person, those times are over. Those times will probably never return. So you have to be prepared to do the detail level work to try and get the conversation started.
Yeah.
And that's where I think a lot of people should start, is as they're looking for roles, as they're looking for organizations, start thinking about, how does my experience match up with what this organization does, and start to jot down ideas and be prepared to explain that or be able to illustrate that.
Yeah. And just to amplify that further, I think if you're looking for a job now, or thinking about it kind of on that passivity level, if that's evening out, right? One of the things I'd encourage people to do is start making a list of what you have accomplished. Go back to the accomplishments. We talked about that with the negotiation thing, but I would say start making that list of all the things you've accomplished, because you forget them. And I got into a practice a couple of years ago where about every 6 months or so, I'd go back and say, okay, what did I just do in the company I was consulting for? What did I do for the past client? And go back to those projects and write it up, because over time I forget the results we had. I forget what we did, things happen, your memory fades. But I would say get those on a list so you can plug and play them, if you will, in your resume. Hey, I used an IT term there, plug and play. I love it.
There you go. See that?
So, I think that's a good place to start. So Chris, this is phenomenal. This has been really helpful. People have been loving it. And where can they connect with you if they want to learn more, catch up with you? If they say, hey, Chris, I'd love to talk to you about a job possibility.
Yep. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the first place that I would encourage people to reach out to me on. I'm easy to find. If you punch Spinman in on LinkedIn, I will come up. I used to say that I was the guy in the pink cowboy hat and the sunglasses, but my profile picture has changed. And so you'll just have to trust when you see the picture up there that it is me. I accept all connections, and I'm happy to spend time to have conversations with folks, answer any questions. I mean, that's my way of giving back, is kind of volunteering my time to kind of help people as best as I can. Help them make connections, give them some advice. I'm willing to look at people's resumes. I'm willing to kind of help do what it is I can to help people get to where they want to do. I mean, it's the same thing on Facebook. I mean, reach out to me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I take all friends on Facebook. I mean, it's I'm on Twitter too. Spinman TV is my handle on Twitter. I'm there. I'm on all of the basic social media platforms. Spinman is, if you punch it into Google, you'll see them all come up. And so, and then my email address at the office is real easy. It's spin, SPIN at Vaco.com. If you just want to shoot me an email, let me know that you saw Tony and I kind of chatting here and you had some questions or whatever, we'll always respond and happy to do that for sure.
Yeah. Make sure you tell them, because I get my fee then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tony gets paid in wine and other accoutrements and stuff. And so he's got to keep the running tally.
That's right. That's right. I probably owe you a bottle of wine for all the people I've sent over to you. So, okay, one more thing. If you want to answer this on air, what's the origin of Spinman?
Okay. So the easiest, and this is the true story. I mean, we're going back almost 30 years. I had a job in Chicago. I worked as a ticket broker. And my boss at the time, his name was Ray Coletti, God rest his soul. He actually just passed away last week. So
you realize this is starting to sound like a mob job.
Yeah. So I'm glad I got to talk about him. You know, there it is. Remind me to tell you some of the other stories off air and everything. But Ray could never spell my last name. So when it came time to write my paychecks, you know, he'd always be like, all right, spell it again, SPI, what is it? You know, blah, 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 blah. How do you say that again? You know, I mean, because you'd look at it and you'd be like, wait, what is that? And then you hear it, you're like, Spintzyk. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But when you look, and so for the longest time, he stopped even filling it out. He was just like, you know, forget it. It's just here. It's a blank check. And so when he'd come in, and I don't know, you know, I'm going to date myself here, but the folks that are watching that remember the old Saturday Night Live skit around the copier guy, where the guy would come in making copies, copyorama, the copinator, you know, the copy guy and everything else. So Ray used to come in and used to say Spinatola, Spinorama, the Spininator, the Spinman, you know. And so the Spinman stuck, and he started calling me the Spinman. And so it got adopted that long ago to where now friends call me the Spinman or some connotation of it. Family, it's the same way. I mean, you know, clients and candidates and everything. A lot of people don't know that my first name is Chris. They've never heard it before.
That's awesome.
And so it's always Spinman or some connotation of it, spinny, you know, whatever it is. In fact, in the office, I'm known as Spin. And if somebody says Chris, not only do I not respond, but everybody else looks around in the office and it's like, who are they talking about? Oh, wait, you know.
That is awesome.
It's you. And I had a client one time I went to a client with my boss, and we were in there visiting, and my boss, I was over at one section of the office, and my boss was talking to the CFO, and I overheard him say, well, yeah, you know, I wanted to come over and introduce myself. You know, I know that Chris has been over here from the office and some of the other folks. CFO's like, well, no, we remember, you know, Ashley coming over and some of this, but Chris, there's no Chris that's come over from your office. My boss is like, well, yeah, he is, because he's standing right over there. And they're like, oh, wait, that's what his name is? We had no idea. He's just the Spinman to us. You know, we didn't even know what his real name was. We just always called him Spinman. And so, you know, it's kind of stuck. So in the tech community here locally, that's how a lot of people know me. I mean, there probably are more people that don't know what my real name is than people who do, for sure.
That's a great story. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, for sure.
I think you missed out though on your real career opportunity as a PR agent.
Yeah, with the Spinman.
Spinman, yeah. It's Spinman here again.
Yeah, exactly. Here it is. You know, the Spin Zone. Everybody asked if I was part of all of that with what's his name who does that. I forgot what the political pundit is.
Yeah. I forget which one it is.
Spin Zone or whatever and stuff. They're like, oh man, that was ready made for you. You know.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Chris, it has been, or Spinman, it has been a phenomenal show. I know we'll have some more conversation off air, but as far as everyone else here, they've enjoyed it. If you are still watching, a couple notes here. One is past episodes. If you want to go there, and this show will be up there shortly. Got to do a little editing to it, but it's at www.transformthehx.com. for transforming the human experience, which is what we do here. And if you want to come back tomorrow, I'm going to have a conversation with Tara Brown, the connection coach. She was on here several months ago. She's coming back. We're going to have a really deep conversation about what's going on. And I'm looking forward to that. So until next time, guys, which is tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Central, I look forward to seeing you then.